Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to another day of the Lockdown Impact Mastery Intensive. Today we have a special guest, Maarten van Andel, the man on the left side, at least for me. Welcome, Maarten. Thank you for coming on. I'm very honored and humbled to have you as a guest during our intensive. Maybe before we start with the actual interview, can you briefly introduce yourself? Who are you? What do you do? What is your background and so on? And then we can take it up from there, if that's okay with you.
Yes, thank you, Bart, for being here. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm Maarten van Andel. I'm a chemical engineer. I worked for Philips and other high-tech companies during 32 years. And I'm presently director of Fontes University of Applied Sciences in Eindhoven, the Netherlands. Mm-hmm. In the past 3 years, I wrote 2 books on sustainable energy. And it is a topic I'm looking forward to talk about with you.
Ah, okay. Yeah, me too. So my first question actually regards your background. What has been your main motive to write your 2 books? Because you have a particular background. You're a scientist, you're a chemist, but you also have a lot of experience in the corporate world. And yeah, it kind of triggered my interest when I first came into contact with your work. That was something that I said, okay, I need to ask this because I think it's very valuable to find out what it is that's put you in this direction.
Yes, I've been wondering myself in retrospect. But I've been active for 15 years in a high-tech company in Eindhoven on sustainability, saving energy, saving materials. And I noticed that if you do that in a clever way, you can not only save a lot of materials and CO2, but also a lot of money. So sustainable entrepreneurship and making money go well together in my vision. And it also triggered me to look more closely at the energy policies in the Netherlands and the EU and worldwide with wind turbines and solar panels and all these things. And I had a feeling that something was wrong there. How many wind turbines or solar panels do we need before 2030 or something like that? So I started to dive into that and make calculations. And I was actually horrified by the outcomes. The numbers don't fit if we say that in 10 years' time we have half our electricity green. That is something that cannot be realized in the way we do it now. And I did more research during a few years, and then I decided I have to write this down in a book. And when there is one book, there comes a second book.
Yeah. Okay. And is there a third book coming, or
yes?
have you finished your work? Is this your legacy to the world? Your 2 books, because we're going to dive a bit deeper into what the books are in a second. The first book being The Green Illusion, the second book being The Green Opportunity. Are you still, playing with the idea in your head to write a third book, or say no? This is it.
Well, writing a book costs a lot of energy, but then in terms of mental energy, not in terms of nuclear power or something.
Yeah.
So both times when I finished the book, I had something. Well, I'm empty now, and no more of this. But then 1 or 2 years later, it can come up again. So who knows? The future is open.
Yeah. Okay. So talking about the first book then, The Green Illusion, what struck me there was that you put a lot of emphasis on, let's say, the tendency of climate activists and the green industry to always focus on specific um, let's say, elements within the larger topic of climate change and so on, but that actually they don't always succeed in distinguishing facts from fiction. Yeah. So my question is, where do these misconceptions come from?
I think an important factor here is that energy as a physical quantity is not something that we can see with our senses, like distance or weight.
Yeah.
And that gives us a poor feeling for the ratios. If you put up a wind turbine, is that a full glass or is it a droplet in a glass compared to, for instance, what the whole country needs? And if you don't make these calculations, you cannot really make right policies and say that in 10 years time or so, we are at a certain point. It's like if I say I want to walk in 1 hour from Amsterdam to Brussels, and I have no clue about how far that is and how fast I can walk, there's no way to check whether this ambition can come true. And a lot of the ambitions and policies in energy are like that. And when you make the calculations, you can see that these policies cannot be realized in the way that they are forwarded.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, you live in the Netherlands. I'm originally from Belgium. And what I also found out, reading more about, yeah, your books, is that actually in the Netherlands, you have lots of wind turbines or turbines, and yeah, in Belgium, we've always looked up to the Netherlands, like as their the example as far as sensible energy policies, long-term sustainability and so on. Yeah, that's what the Netherlands is about. They've always set the example, so to speak. But you kind of come from it, look at it from a different angle. So it's not that positive. That's what you found, at least.
Yes, let me emphasize that I'm not at all a climate denier or something like that. But when we look at, for example, wind turbines and solar panels in the Netherlands, and we look at how much electricity they can now generate, about 11% of the total demand that we have. And that is only 2.5% of the total energy consumption that our country needs. And you look at the speed with which we can build them, it simply doesn't go fast enough. And I go even one step further. I don't think that it can go fast enough at all. So keeping emphasis on make do with windmills, wind turbines, and solar panels is not the way to go to, for instance, the climate agreement in 2030. Because it's like walking to from Amsterdam to Brussels in 1 hour. You can have the ambition, but you simply can't do it.
Okay, yeah, I see. In Belgium, there's been a story evolving, yeah, almost for decades now. Some politicians, they say, yeah, we need to keep the nuclear energy plants open, for a long time. And then there's a new administration, they say, no, we have to close them by this year. And yeah, it's like a never-ending story. And of course, there are some risks involved in having these nuclear energy plants open for so long, especially when the plants are becoming older and older. But as far as wind turbines are concerned, is it like a clean energy, or solar energy as well? Because yeah, you produce, of course, different sort of waste material, but how do the Netherlands tackle this issue? Because we don't have it in Belgium. We have mainly, of course, we have lots of people, individuals putting up solar panels on their roofs, but that's a different story, of course.
Yeah, yeah. The Netherlands have only one nuclear power plant. I think it is wise for countries like the Netherlands and Belgium and Germany and France to have at least one operational nuclear power plant, because it provides the knowledge and the insight to keep up with the world when it comes to developing knowledge. If you don't have an operational power plant, you lose with respect to others that do. So there is a strategic argument, in my view, to have a nuclear power plant or maybe a few up and running. Of course, there are disadvantages, and you mentioned the risks concerned with a breakdown and nuclear waste. But every option has disadvantages. Also, wind turbines and solar panels. For starters, they demand a lot of space and a lot of materials. And in 20, 25 years from now, the present wind turbines and solar panels will produce an endless pile of industrial waste. In fact, they are already doing this in the United States, and no one knows what to do with this enormous pile of industrial waste. It is dug in the ground, it is exported to Africa, and this is something that requires much more attention than it gets today.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
I think that every energy option has pros and cons. That goes for nuclear power, for wind power, for solar power, and there's nothing that we should ban. I'm not in favor of a ban on nuclear power. It is something that we know. It has a big physical potential when it comes to generating energy, and it should be part of a serious discussion for the coming 10 to 20 years when it comes to making energy policies.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Okay, yeah, you mentioned something earlier a few minutes ago about you not being a climate denier, and I guess it's important to point this out because the discussion often gets so heated, and people, yeah, even if they don't want to, they're put in one camp or another camp. Yeah, on the one hand, you have the climate skeptics or even the deniers, and then you have the climate activists or even the climate hysterics. And you say, okay, I'm not, let's say, in either of these camps. I'm climate neutral, and I think that's a very interesting point of view because it kind of takes the let's say the emotion out of the discussion, and you work with logic, you work with numbers, facts, and how do you see yourself? Because I guess it's not easy, because if you say, okay, I'm in favor of something or against something, it's easy for people to kind of categorize what you're doing. But if you say, okay, I'm neutral, I assume that people are interested because it's something you don't often hear in a heated or polarized discussion as the climate discussion actually is. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, I agree with you, Bart. It is often about one camp or the other, and in the Netherlands we would say Ajax against Feyenoord, or Rotterdam against Amsterdam, and that is not what climate policy and energy policy is about. It sometimes has religious proportions, Islam against Christianity, and that is not the way I think we should run this discussion. It is very important to look at the facts and to look at the numbers and to make good calculations, like I explained just now. I am not denying that man is producing a lot of CO2, and that it is very likely that this warms up the climate. In my view, that is not the main point. My main point is that we have to reduce on fossil fuels big time, anyhow, whether or not the climate warms up, because there's also smog, particulates, carbon monoxide, you name it. All these things that you can see from an airplane high up, the brown layer in the lower atmosphere, is something that we don't want. We cannot go on like that. So whether you believe in climate warming, yes or no, it doesn't matter so much. We will have to cut down on fossil fuels anyhow. So the question is not that we should do that. The question is how and how fast. So I'm not denying that we should reduce on fossil fuels and CO2 reduction, but I'm critical about the way we are doing this. And that is a big difference. So I cannot be put in one camp or the other,
No.
because I want to look at the numbers.
Yeah. I agree. Okay. Then I have a question regarding your contact with the policymakers, because if we look back, of course we had the Club of Rome in the 70s, but I started following discussion from the 90s, because that's when actually this issue about climate change, fossil fuels, the energy consumption, it kind of started surfacing in the public discussion in the media. But look at us now. We're 30 years into the future now, and not a lot has changed. Although we had lots of politicians, claiming lots of things, they made bold statements, promises, and so on. But if we're honest, we have to admit that not a lot has happened since then. So I'm wondering, what could be a possible explanation of this? Because I think it's also important that we ourselves, kind of focus more on what we can do ourselves, because the politicians, they care about votes, or they care about us, the people they represent. It's a whole different discussion, maybe for another time. But what do you think? Because you have had lots of contacts with important politicians. For instance, you told me once that you had contacts with the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, Rutte, or the former Prime Minister. I think he's not the Prime Minister anymore, because his government resigned a few weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken. But what's your experience there? What could possibly explain this lack of advancement, of positive change, and that we're still in this difficult situation or predicament?
There's a number of factors, I think. First of all, I think in our present democracy, it is a characteristic property that politicians have to overpromise, because the ones that don't do that don't get elected. So, but that is a general observation I'm making. What also does not help is that many people, including politicians, with all due respect, don't have a lot of insight in energy as a physical quantity. Like I explained, we all understand distance and speed, but energy and power is much more difficult. So it is very easy to overpromise, even if you're not aware of it. And it is very easy to believe people that overpromise, on that it is very hard to check whether it is true what they're saying. When it comes down to real, measures in reducing energy and CO2, there is immediately a lot of resistance. Last year, we reduced the speed on the motorway in the Netherlands from 130 to 100.
Yeah.
That is, in my view, the easiest and cheapest way to reduce 25% CO2. And you are still in 3 hours from Brussels to Amsterdam, safe and sound. So there's no real sacrifice. And there is an enormous resistance, or there has been, against this very easy measure. And we all know that in Germany, it is completely impossible to discuss this seriously, something like that. It's completely impossible. Well, every second grader in school can calculate in 15 minutes that it saves an enormous amount of CO2 without cost. So our own behavior and demands, if you like driving fast in a sportive car, prevent us from doing the right things. And if we don't want it, the politicians don't want it, because the politicians that want it don't get elected. So that's a vicious circle, as it were.
Yeah, exactly. That's the sad reality we have to face. Okay.
No, but what I'm saying is that in the end, it comes down to you and me. If we don't want it, politicians can't do it and industry can't do it. I mean, industry can make cars that use 1 liter of fuel in 50 kilometers. That is possible today with present technology.
Yeah.
Why doesn't that happen? Because people don't want it. And if we don't want it, it's not going to happen. So we ourselves will have to look differently at our lives and the way we use, or rather waste, energy.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's really valuable what you just said there, because I was particularly attracted to your material, and the opportunity I seized upon to have you on as a speaker, because you put a lot of emphasis and focus on the responsibility that we have ourselves. Because in your book you say it's actually about being aware of the problem and actually being open to change your behavior based on that awareness. And yeah, if it's not let's say a strategy that politicians adopt because they don't want to look or make themselves unpopular, how
Yeah.
how did that reflect on you? How was some of the reactions to the books you wrote? Because yeah, you say that's something that politicians are afraid to say in a way.
Uh, yes, in a way, and not in the way that they are stupid or scared people, but in the way that it is electoral suicide if they become honest about that.
Mhm.
Um, let me say that I'm not an angel, and I don't believe in 0-100 or black and white. But I know that driving more carefully helps, eating less meat helps, and I'm not proclaiming that we should all become vegetarians. But if we do a little bit less of that,
Uh,
maybe half of it, that is the challenge that we want to pick up for the coming 10 years. We can really halve our energy consumption in the way we behave. If we insulate our house, if we drive more slowly, and if we use existing stuff longer, because buying new things also means a lot of energy consumption in the industrial chain. If we do those three things, your house insulation, your driving behavior, and your consumption behavior, your buying behavior, we can in 10 years time save half the amount of energy that we use. And that brings us to the Dutch climate agreement without any extra wind turbine. Only our behavior can do that. And that
yeah,
is what I'm promoting. And
yeah.
now the lights in my office have switched off automatically. So they save energy. And when I move, they're on again.
Yeah.
Perfect example, perfect timing.
Yeah, exactly. It's fancy, but it works. I think it's these small changes that we can yeah, adopt in our immediate environment, that if we all do them, they can make a huge difference. And I think that
Yes.
we as human beings have the responsibility to look after each other, to also look after the future generations, because they will be confronted with the choices or the consequences of the choices that we make today. So yeah. Okay, I have a few more questions, because yeah, actually, it's easier said than done, these behavioral changes. You also mention in your books the psychological aspects and the consequences for our lives, leisure, and luxury.
Mm-hmm.
Could you maybe delve a bit deeper into that? Because, yeah, people have a lot of resistance towards even considering these changes. What is it that, in your opinion, because yeah, you're clearly the expert in this, what is it that keeps them from reflecting a bit more on actually the impact of their lifestyle?
there can be various reasons also for various individuals, but I think that ignorance is an important factor.
Mhm.
People are unaware, they don't have enough insight, and I hear that often also from people reading my books or hearing my presentations. Um, I give facts and some tips, and people often say to me, I didn't know that. I didn't know that my car is my biggest energy consumption, or my house, or my buying behavior. So they put a lot of focus on, for instance, the lighting, like here in my office, which is good, but it is only a very small portion, and people are very ignorant about how big the different parts of their lives are in terms of energy consumption. And I dare say that for most Europeans, the car, the house, and the buying behavior constitute more than 90% of their total CO2 footprint. So if you want to start anywhere, start there. Use existing stuff longer. So I'm not saying goodbye to fashion at all, but it is something that we can do better. And it doesn't have to be extreme. It doesn't have to be big sacrifice. But if you are more aware also about a little bit about the numbers, you can make effective choices. If you know that your car is your biggest footprint, and you know that going from 130 to 100 kilometers an hour saves 25% easily in energy, CO2, and also, of course, money, and you are still safe and sound and in time at your destination. Uh, those are the things that we must become aware of. And if we become aware of how beneficial those adaptations in behavior can be, there is a problem. There is a chance that we are willing to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, 2021, that's the year now, 2030, it's not that far away. It's on the horizon, but I think it's a very positive and hopeful message that we can actually achieve this in less than 10 years. If we all take up our responsibility, then we can actually achieve something that hasn't been done for 30 years now. So
True. And
yeah.
maybe I can emphasize that in the policies, there is a lot of attention at the energy production side, like wind turbines and solar panels. And I think there should be much more focus on the energy consumption side, i.e. our behavior, and also something like developing cars that use only 1 liter in 50 kilometers instead of 1 in 20. Um, and if we do that, we have more effect in shorter time for much less money.
Yeah.
So my plea is, let's much more focus on the energy consumption side, including human behavior. And it is possible to do that without draconic measures. If we keep focusing on the production side, for example, in the Netherlands, it is said that 2/3 of the electricity should be solar and wind in 2030, so 10 years from now. I've made a simple calculation. If we want to achieve that, we have to install 3 wind turbines and 60,000 solar panels every day for the coming 10 years. And if you know that it is an impossible ambition to do that. There must be another way.
Yeah, yeah. Just a case of adding, up the numbers, and then, you have to acknowledge that it's not possible. But you just said that actually cars can be produced or being put into circulation that consume only 1 liter per 50 kilometers. Did I hear that correctly?
You heard that correctly. Yes.
And
Yes.
is that like a distant dream, that something that needs to be worked on for at least 5 or 10 years, or is that something that can be done, on the short term?
Well, of course, there is a development cycle in the car industry. The technology is available, and we have to use different materials, reduce the weight of the car, and of course also the number of horsepowers under the hood. But cars that consume that kind of energy already exist. For example, solar cars.
Oh yeah.
like they're being developed in the Netherlands. The amount of energy that a car uses per kilometer, per driven kilometer at, let's say, 100 or 120 kilometers an hour can be halved already. And if you do that, you halve the fuel consumption. That is, but of course, the car industry has to develop this. So we could say that they should have, for example, 5 years to go that way. And maybe there is an intermediate stage. And then in 10 years' time, we should be there. That is definitely possible. The only point is we have to want it.
Yeah. And do you see that happening? Yeah, because
No.
No. And
I
why
don't see
not?
it happening. The major car manufacturers don't appear to desire this. And they have a lot of influence, of course, in national politics in countries. And as long as they don't want it and this influence is there, and of course the consumers don't seem to want it either, I don't see it happening.
No.
I want it to happen, but I don't know how.
No, of course. Yeah, it has to be a joint effort. I mean, the car manufacturers, the politicians who have to maybe change or vote specific laws to make it happen or to support
Yeah.
it. And of course, we as consumers, we have to want it as well. And yeah.
And of course you cannot pull up to 100 kilometers in 4 seconds anymore. But when I meet people in the train or in the bus, there's never someone that complains about the speed of acceleration in a car or in a bus or a train.
No.
So why should it be a point in your car?
Yeah.
It's a different mindset. It's it's a little bit of rethinking, but I think it's possible. And now driving 100 on the road, I thought it was slow too, but you get used to it quickly.
Yeah.
It's not that difficult.
No, exactly. Because 100 years ago, people they used a horse and a carriage to get around. So and we got used to driving with cars. So why wouldn't we get used to driving a car? It's a maximum speed of 100 kilometers an hour. Doesn't make sense if you think about it.
In the largest countries of the world, like United States and Canada and Australia, they've been doing 110 per hour or so for the past 40 years, and their distances are much longer. So no one can say that it is not possible.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, at least one important question I haven't asked yet, because the topic of the intensive is actually the lockdown and creating a lifestyle for yourself that makes you kind of lockdown proof, if you can put it like that. But what we've seen, especially in the beginning, was it last year, March, April, lots of countries, they were put in a severe lockdown. And I lived at that time in a place, it's in Belgium, but in Belgium, it's a small country. We have lots of cars. The number of cars in traffic keeps increasing every year. But when you went out with your car, you saw that it was less and less traffic, and sometimes the streets were completely empty. And you could also sense it in the air, the difference.
Yeah.
The air was much fresher. It was enjoyable to be outside. So yeah, my question is actually, is this a way we could let's say make things happen more quickly, like these lockdowns, and keep people from using their car? Because that's what it actually was. People were they weren't given the permission to go outside. How do you look at that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cars, and also of course other forms of travel, flying. Of course, the corona pandemic has been and still is an involuntary way, which forces us to stay at home or to work at home. And the upside is that we have a lot of more cleaner air, brighter stars, and less CO2 emission. I don't believe that the involuntary way and locking people up in their homes is eventually the way to achieve this. But we can learn from the effects that we see now in an involuntary way, and design policies um, that gives us back control of our lives and our economies, while keeping the benefits that we see now. Um, so I don't think that we should all stay locked up at home. At least that is my opinion. I also like to go out. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't travel or fly anymore, not at all.
No.
But we can rethink this, and maybe um, do it less, or do half of it. And if we do half of it, and I mentioned this before, in 10 years' time, we can fulfill climate agreements without any cost.
Yeah.
And I think that we ourselves, but also our policymakers, should think about the lessons that we learn today in an involuntary way. Because the only mistake that we can make is not learn from the mishap that overcomes us, or not learn from our mistakes. There's a lot of mishap now. We don't want it. No one wants it. But we can learn, and it is our duty to learn from that.
Yeah, yeah, you're 100% right there, because it's been 1 year now, and yeah, it faced us with lots of challenges, but to the challenges, you know, you come to certain realizations, you gain certain insights, and yeah, I mean, if it's a way to become more aware of a certain situation, you can actually find the you know the motivation within yourself to change from within. Because if the government says, okay, you can't use your car to go out because yeah, we impose a lockdown, it's different, because when the lockdown ends, everybody will start using their car again as before, and then we wouldn't have achieved anything. So yeah. Okay.
And maybe when that happens this spring or coming summer, I don't know. Of course, we will all be very happy, like young cattle in the field. But we should prolong this to better policies. And you know, I mentioned the example of a much more fuel efficient car, but there are many other things that we can do without disturbing our lives the way that overcame us in the past 12 months.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, I think that's a huge takeaway we can get from this interview. Okay, before we wrap things up, Maarten, can you say something about yourself? Where can people find out more about your work? Can they go to a specific website to see where they can buy your books, because obviously it's a very interesting topic, and you have a very sensible approach. So I support your work, and I encourage people to go to your website and you know, see where they can find out more and get your book, so they can read it and have more knowledge about this important issue that is relevant to us all. So your website, it is...
Yes, my website is maarten-vanandel.com. maarten-vanandel.com.
Yeah.
And I have a LinkedIn profile. I publish a weekly newsletter in English on Sunday afternoon. So you can also find me there.
And where can people sign up for your newsletter?
If you go to my website, you go to contact, you can send a mail, which I will see, and then I put you on the address list.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. I will send out the link to your LinkedIn profile, so people can connect with you on LinkedIn. And I will also send out the link to your website URL, so people can sign up there for your newsletter. I'm also subscribed, register for your newsletter, and it's very interesting. I can, it's not too long because we often get email overloads.
1 minute reading.
Exactly. So
Always 1 minute reading.
yeah, that's correct. So is there anything else you'd like to leave us with before we end the interview? Is there maybe like one more thing that we haven't touched upon, but you would still like to share at this point?
Yes, I do. First of all, thank you, Bart, for the hospitality and the opportunity.
It was my pleasure.
And the last, yes, likewise. The last thing I would like to say is, we talked about human behavior, and it starts with yourself. It starts with me, and it starts with you. As long as we keep pointing at others, at our neighbors, or at politicians, or at companies, that they should start doing something, nothing is happening. But if we start doing it ourselves, we can, and promoting it by good example, I think that is the way that 7 billion people on Earth in the end will achieve what they want to achieve.
Wow.
So don't point at others, point at yourself.
Yeah, you put it very eloquently and wisely. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.
You have a nice day. And
Likewise.
I hope to talk to you again soon. Thank you, Maarten.
Thank you very much, Bart. Thank you all.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.